My name is Morgan Taylor and I am 28 years old. Working at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago had always been my dream, despite managing a congenital heart defect since childhood. Last Tuesday, during the biggest presentation of my career, everything went dark. I collapsed in front of my colleagues and our most important client. The room spun, my chest burned, and then nothing. When I woke up in the hospital, the doctors had called my parents. They never came. Instead, my sister tagged in. Before I dive into how my family abandoned me when I needed them most, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family, resilience, and finding strength in unexpected places. Growing up in suburban Boston, our house was always immaculate, our clothes always pressed, and our achievements always on display. What you would never see on display was affection. My parents, Richard and Patricia Taylor, built their lives around their careers, Dad as a renowned cardiac surgeon, ironically enough, and Mom as a high-powered corporate attorney. Family photos adorned our walls, carefully curated images of a perfect family that existed only for the camera. I was diagnosed with my heart condition when I was 7 years old. After weeks of unexplained fatigue and shortness of breath during elementary school recess, my school nurse insisted my parents take me for a proper examination. I remember sitting in the pediatric cardiologist's office, swinging my legs nervously as the doctor explained my congenital heart defect to my parents. My mother checked her watch repeatedly. My father questioned the diagnosis, despite the clear evidence on the echocardiogram. "Are you absolutely certain? We have no family history of cardiac issues," my father challenged, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being the expert in the room. "The tests are conclusive, Dr. Taylor," the cardiologist replied firmly. "Morgan will need medication, regular monitoring, and possibly surgery in the future." My mother sighed, already pulling out her phone to reschedule appointments. "This is really inconvenient timing, Richard. I have the Westfield merger closing next week." That was the essence of my childhood. My condition was not a health concern, it was an inconvenience, a scheduling conflict, something that interrupted the important business of their lives. My sister Stephanie came along 4 years after my diagnosis. From the moment she was born, we formed a bond that would become my lifeline. 4 years old when Stephanie was born, I took my role as big sister seriously. While our parents attended galas, conferences, and networking events, I learned to heat bottles, change diapers, and sing lullabies. By the time Stephanie was in elementary school, I was the one checking homework, making lunches, and attending parent-teacher conferences when our parents sent their regrets. "Why don't Mom and Dad ever come to my recitals?" 8-year-old Stephanie asked one night as I tucked her into bed. "They're really busy helping other people," I explained, smoothing her hair. "Dad fixes people's hearts, and Mom helps people with their problems." "But who helps us?" she asked, her innocent question piercing straight through my practiced defenses. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We help each other, Steph. That's what sisters do." As we grew older, Stephanie became fiercely protective of me, especially regarding my health. She noticed when I became pale or short of breath before I even recognized the symptoms myself. When I had to miss school for doctor's appointments, Stephanie would collect my assignments and help me catch up. While our parents delegated my medical care to a series of nannies and housekeepers, Stephanie memorized my medication schedule and researched my condition. By high school, the pattern was firmly established. Our parents provided financially but were emotionally absent. They attended major events when it aligned with their schedules and maintained the appearance of involved parenting for their colleagues and friends. Behind closed doors, we raised ourselves, with me taking the lead until Stephanie grew old enough to share the responsibility. Despite the challenges, or perhaps because of them, I was determined to succeed. I pushed myself through college, managing my health condition while maintaining a 3-9 paw. When I landed my first marketing job in Chicago, our parents acknowledged it with an expensive gift and a brief congratulatory call. When Stephanie was accepted to medical school, inspired by years of accompanying me to cardiology appointments, they hosted a lavish party, inviting colleagues and friends to celebrate the future Dr. Taylor who would follow in her father's footsteps. Now, 4 years after graduating college, I had worked my way up to senior account manager at Palmer Reed Marketing. My current position had me overseeing campaigns for several major clients, including Horizon Healthcare, a national hospital chain, ironically enough. The pressure was intense, the hours long, and the stress constant. Not ideal conditions for someone with a heart condition, but I was determined to prove myself. For weeks leading up to my collapse, my body had been sending warning signals. I experienced increasing fatigue, occasional dizziness, and several episodes of chest discomfort that I dismissed as anxiety or heartburn. My medication had recently been adjusted, and I convinced myself the symptoms were just my body adapting to the new dosage. The morning of my collapse, I woke up feeling unusually tired. My alarm had gone off at 5:30 am as usual, but I hit snooze twice, something I never did. In the shower, I felt lightheaded and had to steady myself against the wall. Over breakfast, I doubled my usual coffee intake, hoping the caffeine would clear the fog. Looking back, these were all warning signs I should have heeded. I arrived at the office early to prepare for the presentation. Horizon Healthcare was considering a $3 million expansion of their marketing campaign. Then I was leading the pitch. My boss, Diana, had hinted that a successful presentation could lead to a promotion to director level. At 28, that would make me the youngest director in the firm's history. Morgan, the conference room is set up. Horizon executives will be here in 30 minutes. My assistant Kyle informed me as I reviewed my notes one last time. Thanks, Kyle. How do I look? I asked, smoothing down my blazer. Confident and ready to nail this, he assured me, though I caught the concerned glance he gave me. Are you feeling okay? You seem a little pale. Just presentation nerves, I lied, ignoring the persistent tightness in my chest. I'll be fine once we get started. As the Horizon team arrived and introductions were made, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching myself perform from a distance. My hands trembled slightly as I distributed presentation folders, which I concealed by quickly clasping them behind my back. The room felt too warm, then too cold. The warning signs were all there, but I was too focused on my professional opportunity to acknowledge the medical emergency that was building within me. The presentation began well. I had always prided myself on my ability to command a room, to weave data and storytelling into compelling narratives that made clients feel both informed and inspired. The first few slides flowed smoothly as I outlined our proposed strategy for Horizon Healthcare's national rebranding. What sets Horizon apart is your commitment to patient-centered care, I explained, advancing to a slide showing our proposed tagline, Horizon Healthcare with you every step of the way. Our campaign will emphasize the human connection that makes your facilities different from competitors. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, Horizon's chief marketing officer, nodded approvingly. My boss, Diana, sitting at the back of the room, gave me a subtle thumbs up. Everything was going according to plan, except for the increasing pressure in my chest and the slight blur at the edges of my vision. 20 minutes into the presentation, I reached the section on digital strategy. As I explained our approach to targeted social media campaigns, the first serious warning sign hit. Mid-sentence, I suddenly couldn't remember what came next. I stared at my notes, but the words seemed to swim on the page. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the air-conditioned room. As you can see from these projections, my voice sounded distant to my own ears. I tried to focus on the next point, but the tightness in my chest intensified, transforming from discomfort to sharp pain. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my ribcage, beating with a frightening irregularity. Miss Taylor, are you all right? Dr. Simmons asked, her clinical gaze assessing me from across the table. I gripped the edge of the podium, my knuckles white. I'm fine, just need a moment. The room tilted suddenly, the faces of the Horizon executives blurred together, a high-pitched ringing filled my ears. Morgan, Diana was on her feet now, moving toward me with alarm. I tried to reassure everyone to push through, but no words came out. Instead, a wave of dizziness crashed over me. My legs buckled. The last thing I remember is Kyle lunging forward, trying to catch me as I collapsed to the floor, presentation materials scattering around me. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. First, voices urgent, professional, concerned. She's coming around. Morgan, can you hear me? A pale light flashed across my eyes. I was on the floor, a jacket folded under my head. Kyle kneeling beside me, his face taut with worry. Diana speaking rapidly into a phone. The Horizon executives standing back, giving space but watching with concern. Cardiac history, medication. Yes, responsive now. Diana was relaying information to what I assumed was a 911 operator. Embarrassment flooded through me, almost as painful as the physical symptoms. I had collapsed in front of our biggest potential client, in the middle of the most important presentation of my career. I tried to sit up to salvage the situation somehow. Don't move, Kyle said firmly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Ambulance is on the way. The presentation, I mumbled, my words slurring slightly. I need to finish. Dr. Simmons stepped forward, her expression softening. The only thing you need to do is get medical attention, Ms. Taylor. We can reschedule. Paramedics arrived with efficiency, filling the sleek conference room with equipment and urgent professionalism. As they took my vitals and placed me on a stretcher, I drifted in and out of awareness. The ceiling tiles of our office building slid past overhead. Colleagues stared as I was wheeled through the open workspace. Someone had placed an oxygen mask over my face, and the cool flow of air helped clear my mind slightly. In the ambulance, a paramedic named Steve kept up a steady stream of reassuring conversation while his partner Alicia monitored my vital signs and established an IV line. "We're going to take good care of you, Morgan," Steve promised as the ambulance navigated Chicago traffic, sirens blaring. Northwestern Memorial is just a few minutes away. They have an excellent cardiac unit. "My parents," I managed to say through the oxygen mask. "My dad's a cardiologist, should call him." "We'll make sure the hospital contacts your emergency contacts," Alicia assured me, exchanging a glance with Steve that I couldn't quite interpret. At the hospital, everything accelerated. I was whisked through emergency department doors, transferred to an exam room, surrounded by medical staff firing questions about my history, my medication, my symptoms. A young resident named Dr. Patel took the lead, her movements quick but gentle as she listened to my heart and reviewed the egg readings. "Morgan, you're experiencing a serious cardiac arrhythmia," she explained, her voice calm but leaving no room for argument. "Your heart is beating irregularly, and based on your history and the medications you're taking, we believe it's a complication related to your condition and possibly a reaction to your recent medication adjustment." Tests followed: blood work, more detailed cardiac monitoring, a chest X-ray, and echocardiogramic. Each procedure a blur of technicians, machines, and clinical instructions. Throughout it all, the pain in my chest ebbed and flowed, sometimes receding enough that I could almost convince myself it wasn't serious, other times intensifying until I gasped for breath. Finally, Dr. Patel returned with my preliminary results. "We need to stabilize your heart rhythm and monitor you for at least 48 hours, she explained. "The arrhythmia is significant, Morgan. You're fortunate it happened somewhere you could get immediate help." "But I have work, deadlines," I protested weakly, already knowing it was pointless. Dr. Patel gave me a look that reminded me of when Stephanie would call me out on downplaying my symptoms. "What you have is a serious cardiac event that could have been fatal if left untreated. Work will have to wait." As nurses prepared to transfer me to a cardiac monitoring room, I remembered my parents again. Despite our complicated relationship, their medical knowledge, especially my father's, would be valuable now. "Has anyone called my parents?" I asked a nurse who was adjusting my IV. "The doctor has contacted your emergency contacts," she assured me. "Hospital protocol. I'm sure they're on their way." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of hope and dread. Would this be serious enough for them to actually show up? Part of me wanted their medical expertise and authority in this situation. A deeper part, the child who had waited through countless lonely doctor appointments, just wanted them to finally put me first. "They'll be here soon," I told myself as I was wheeled to my room, trying to believe it was true. The cardiac monitoring room was clinically sterile, yet somehow managed to feel claustrophobic. Machines beeped steadily, tracking each irregular beat of my heart. Through the window I could see the Chicago skyline, afternoon sun glinting off glass buildings. People going about their normal Tuesday while I lay tethered to monitors and an IV pole. An hour passed, then two. I kept glancing at the door, expecting to see my father stride in, medical chart in hand, ready to take control of my treatment plan, or my mother, phone tucked between ear and shoulder, simultaneously managing her legal cases while checking on her daughter. Neither appeared. My mind drifted back to when I was 11, scheduled for a cardiac stress test. Mom had promised to take the morning off. Dad was supposed to meet us there to consult with the specialist. I sat in the waiting room for 3 hours, accompanied only by our housekeeper, Mrs. Garcia, who spoke limited English and couldn't answer the medical questions the doctor asked. Neither parent showed up. Mom called later, apologizing about a client emergency. Dad never mentioned it at all. "How are we doing in here?" Nurse Jenny came in to check my IV and vitals. She was in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and efficient, gentle hands. "Any visitors yet?" "Not yet," I said, trying to sound casual. "My parents are probably stuck in traffic, Chicago, you know." Jenny nodded, but her eyes reflected a sympathy that told me she didn't believe it either. "Well, you just focus on resting. Dr. Patel will be back to check on you soon." I reached for my phone on the bedside table, wincing as the movement pulled at my IV. 3 missed calls from Diana and Kyle at work, none from my parents. I dialed my father's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. "Dad, it's Morgan. I'm at Northwestern Memorial. Had some heart issues during a work presentation. Doctors say it's an arrhythmia related to my medication. Just let me know when you might come by. I paused, hating the vulnerability in my voice. They want to keep me for observation. Next I tried my mother. 3 rings, then voicemail. I left a similar message, trying to sound matter-of-fact rather than desperate. Text messages followed. To Dad at Northwestern Memorial, serious arrhythmia, room 412, when can you come? To Mom in hospital, Northwestern Memorial, cardiac unit, please call. The responses never came. 3 more hours passed. Nurses came and went. Dr. Patel returned to explain they were adjusting my medication and would be monitoring my heart overnight. Still no parents. Has anyone else been contacted? I asked Dr. Patel. My sister is in medical school in Michigan. We typically only call the primary emergency contacts first, she explained. Would you like us to try reaching your sister? I hesitated. Stephanie was in the middle of her clinical rotations. She had exams coming up. No, I decided reluctantly. She's really busy with school. I don't want to worry her if it's not necessary. By early evening, hunger had replaced some of my anxiety. A hospital aide delivered a dinner tray, bland chicken, steamed vegetables, and jello that wobbled with every beep of the heart monitor. As I picked at the food, I overheard 2 nurses talking just outside my door. The Taylor patient in 412, one said quietly. Has her family arrived yet? No, still no one, the other replied. Called multiple times. Emergency contact goes to voicemail now. That's the 3rd no-show family this week. Sad. I put down my fork, appetite gone. 6 hours had passed since I was admitted. 6 hours of waiting, hoping, making excuses for why they hadn't come. Chicago traffic was bad, but not 6 hours bad. Dad could be in surgery, but not for 6 hours without checking his phone. Mom was probably in meetings, but she checked her messages obsessively every 15 minutes. It was a point of pride for her to be constantly available to client. The truth was simpler and more painful. I wasn't a priority, again. I tried calling once more. This time my mother picked up on the 4th ring. Morgan, I'm in the middle of something, she answered, her voice clipped and distracted. Background noise suggested she was at a restaurant. Mom, I'm in the hospital, I said, hearing the slight tremor in my voice. Northwestern Memorial. The doctors called you hours ago. Yes, I got the message. Your father and I discussed it. He says these episodes happen with your condition, and the Northwestern Cardiac Unit is perfectly capable of handling it. They want to keep me overnight for observation, I pressed. The doctor said it was serious. Morgan, my mother sighed, the sound of her impatience all too familiar. Your father is the cardiologist in the family, and he says if it were truly critical they would have indicated that. We're both in the middle of important commitments tonight. The background noise clarified, clinking glasses, laughter, not a work meeting, a dinner party or restaurant. I see, I said, my voice hollow. So you're not coming? We'll try to stop by tomorrow if schedules allow, she replied, already sounding distant. Your father has surgeries lined up from 7 a.m., and I have depositions until 4, but perhaps after that. After that brief conversation, my phone pinged with a text from my mother. In important meetings, your father is in surgery, you'll be fine. The blatant lie after I'd literally just heard the social background noise felt like a physical blow. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then placed the phone face down on the tray table. Something broke inside me then, not my heart that was already damaged in ways the monitors couldn't detect, but whatever defensive wall I'd built to protect myself from my parents' indifference. Hot tears spilled down my cheeks, and for once, I didn't try to stop them. I cried for the little girl waiting alone in doctors' offices, for the teenager explaining to teachers why no parent would be attending conferences, for the adult still pathetically hoping for parental concern that never materialized. Nurse Jenny came in to check on me and found me sobbing. Without a word, she pulled the privacy curtain closed and sat on the edge of the bed. Let it out, honey, she encouraged, passing me tissues. Sometimes a good cry is medicinal. When the tears finally subsided, leaving me drained and hiccuping, Jenny shared her own story. How her mother had suffered from alcoholism, how Jenny had practically raised her younger sibling. Family isn't always what we hope for, she said gently. Sometimes we have to build our own. As night fell over Chicago, I watched lights blink on across the city's skyline. Each window represented a story, a life, perhaps a family. I wondered how many of those illuminated squares contained people who felt as alone as I did. Night had fully descended over Chicago, transforming my hospital room window into a mirror that reflected my pale face against the darkness. The evening shift nurse had just completed her rounds, adjusting my IV and checking my vitals with quiet efficiency. I was left alone with the steady beeping of monitors and my cycling thoughts of abandonment and self-pity. I had just closed my eyes, attempting to sleep despite the intermittent hospital announcements and the distant sounds of medical emergencies, when I heard a commotion in the hallway, raised voices, hurried footsteps, someone at the nurse's station speaking urgently. I need to see my sister Morgan Taylor, room 412. I'm a medical student, I understand protocols, but I need to see her now. I recognized that voice immediately. My eyes flew open as the door to my room burst open, revealing a disheveled Stephanie standing in the doorway. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was still wearing light blue scrubs under her jacket. Her face, so similar to mine in features but always more expressive, was flushed from exertion and emotion. "Steph," I whispered, hardly believing she was actually there. "Morgan," she rushed to my bedside, dropping her backpack unceremoniously on the floor. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around me, careful of the IV lines and monitoring equipment. "God, Morgan, I just found out. I came as soon as I could." The warmth of her embrace broke through the emotional numbness I'd been cultivating all day. I clutched at her scrubs, burying my face against her shoulder as tears threatened again. "How did you even know?" I managed to ask when she finally pulled back to look at me, her hands moving automatically to check my pulse at the wrist even though the monitor displayed it clearly. Stephanie pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, still holding my hand. "Pure chance," she explained, pushing stray hairs from her face. "I was finishing my rotation in cardiology, and Dr. Mehta was reviewing admissions from affiliated hospitals. I saw your name on the Northwestern transfer list and nearly had a heart attack myself." "They transferred my information to Michigan?" I asked, confused. "Apparently Dad is still listed as a consulting physician on your medical records," Stephanie explained, her expression darkening. "When Northwestern couldn't reach him directly, they sent your case information to his affiliated hospitals. No one bothered to tell me, I just happened to see it." The realization that I could have been seriously ill or worse, and Stephanie might never have been notified, sent a chill through me. "I told them not to bother you," I admitted. "I knew you had exams coming up." "Are you kidding me? Exams?" Stephanie's voice rose in disbelief. "Morgan, you're my sister. Nothing is more important than that." She glanced at the monitors, her trained eye assessing my condition. "What did the doctor say? What happened exactly?" I recounted the events of the day, the presentation, the collapse, the diagnosis. Stephanie listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying medical questions that reminded me she was no longer the little girl I'd raised but a nearly qualified doctor herself. "And Mom and Dad?" she finally asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "They're not coming," I said simply. "Mom claims Dad is in surgery and she's in meetings." Stephanie's expression hardened. "Surgery meetings at 9 p.m. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling them right now." "Steph, don't." But she was already dialing, her jaw set in determination. After a few moments, she looked at me significantly and hit the speaker button. "Stephanie," our mother answered, sounding surprised. "Isn't it a bit late for a call? Don't you have classes tomorrow?" "Where are you right now, Mom?" Stephanie asked directly, ignoring the question. "At home, of course. Your father and I just finished dinner. Is something wrong?" I closed my eyes, the confirmation of their lie settling like a weight on my chest. They weren't in surgery or meetings, they simply chose not to come. "Something wrong?" Stephanie repeated, her voice rising. "Yes, something is very wrong. My sister, your daughter, is in the hospital with a serious cardiac condition, and neither of you bothered to show up." There was a pause, then my mother's voice, cooler now. "Your father assessed the situation based on the information provided by the hospital. Morgan's condition, while requiring observation, is not critical. We plan to visit tomorrow when it's convenient for you." Stephanie interrupted. "Morgan collapsed at work. She could have died. The doctors called you hours ago and you didn't even tell me she was hospitalized." "Stephanie, your academic performance is crucial right now. We didn't want to alarm you unnecessarily." My father's voice joined the conversation. He must have picked up another extension. "Unnecessarily?" Stephanie was nearly shouting now. "Dad, you're a cardiologist. You of all people should understand the seriousness of arrhythmias with her condition." "I understand her condition better than anyone," my father replied with the clinical detachment I knew so well. "Northwestern has perfectly adequate cardiac care. Morgan tends to be dramatic about her symptoms, always has been." I flinched at his words. All those years of minimizing my pain, dismissing my concerns, making me question the validity of my own body's signals. "Dramatic?" Stephanie echoed in disbelief. She collapsed unconscious in front of her colleagues. Her heart rhythm was dangerously irregular. "I've seen her chart, Dad. This wasn't drama, this was a life-threatening event." "Stephanie," my mother cut in, "we understand you're upset, but your father and I have demanding careers that require No, Stephanie interrupted. Don't you dare finish that sentence with some excuse about your careers. Morgan has a demanding career too, one she's excelling at despite the health challenges you've always treated as an inconvenience. And even with all that, if I was hospitalized, she would have been there immediately, no questions asked. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father spoke, his tone shifting to the patronizing one he used when he thought emotions were clouding rational judgment. Stephanie, I think you're letting your personal attachment affect your medical assessment. When you complete your training, you'll understand. If completing my training means becoming the kind of doctor, the kind of parent who abandons their child in a medical crisis, then maybe I should reconsider my career choice. Stephanie shot back. Morgan deserves better than this, she always has. The call ended shortly after with vague promises from our parents to reassess their schedules for tomorrow. Stephanie put her phone down, her hands shaking slightly with anger. I'm sorry, she said, turning back to me. I shouldn't have done that in front of you. I just couldn't believe they. It's okay, I interrupted, reaching for her hand. Actually, it's not okay, none of this is. But hearing you stand up for me like that, it means everything, Steph. We sat in silence for a moment, the beeping monitors the only sound in the room. The reality of our parents' indifference hung between us, no longer a suspicion or fear but a confirmed truth, exposed under the harsh fluorescent hospital lighting. They're never going to change, are they? I finally asked, voicing the question that had lingered in my heart for years. Stephanie squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolution. Probably not, but we have each other, we always have. In that moment, the sister I had raised, the one who now sat beside my hospital bed after driving 3 hours on a moment's notice, showed me what true family looked like, not the perfect image my parents had cultivated for their colleagues and friends, but something real, messy, imperfect, but present when it mattered most. The night stretched on, the hospital gradually quieting as visitors left and most patients settled into sleep. Stephanie refused to leave my side, convincing the night nurse to bring her reclining chair where she could doze between my regular vital checks. Despite her insistence that she was fine, I could see the exhaustion in her face. She had driven straight from her hospital rotation in Michigan without stopping to rest or eat. You should get some actual sleep, I told her around midnight. There's a hotel across the street. I'm not leaving you alone, she replied firmly, adjusting the thin hospital blanket someone had given her. I've pulled plenty of all-nighters during rotations. This chair is luxury compared to the on-call room cots. I smiled, warmed by her devotion even as guilt nagged at me for disrupting her studies. At least eat something more substantial, I insisted, pointing to the vending machine snacks she'd accumulated. The cafeteria opens at 5. Promise me you'll get a real breakfast. Yes, Mom, she teased, the childhood joke between us carrying more weight now. I had been a mother figure to her in many ways, and here she was, returning that care tenfold. Eventually, Stephanie's breathing deepened as she fell into exhausted sleep, her body contorted awkwardly in the recliner. I watched her for a while, then turned my attention to the Chicago skyline still glittering beyond my window. The medication they had given me earlier made me drowsy, and I finally drifted off to the steady rhythm of the cardiac monitor. I'm not sure what time it was when I first noticed the change. I woke suddenly, a strange fluttering sensation in my chest, like a bird trapped beneath my ribs. The sensation wasn't exactly painful, more unsettling, unfamiliar. I lay still, trying to assess what I was feeling. The cardiac monitor still beeped steadily, though perhaps a bit faster than before. Just a nightmare, I told myself, just anxiety after an emotional day. But as I tried to settle back to sleep, the fluttering intensified, accompanied by a faint dizziness. I glanced at the monitor and noticed my heart rate had indeed increased, not dramatically but enough to notice. I didn't want to wake Stephanie over what might be nothing, so I pressed the call button for the nurse, thinking they could check and reassure me. Before the night nurse could respond, Stephanie was already awake and on her feet, her medical training overriding her exhaustion. She had developed an almost preternatural sense for my symptoms over the years. What's wrong? She asked immediately, her eyes going to the monitor then back to my face. Probably nothing, I said, trying to sound casual, just feeling a little fluttery. Stephanie didn't respond verbally. Instead, she reached for my wrist, checking my pulse manually while watching the monitor. Her expression shifted from sleepy concern to clinical focus. Your rhythm's changed, she said, reaching across me to hit the call button again, more urgently this time. How's your breathing? Any chest pain? No pain, just weird, I managed, the fluttering intensifying like my heart is vibrating. Stephanie nodded grimly, possible ventricular tachycardia developing. She muttered, more to herself than to me. She moved to the door, calling out, "I need a nurse in here now." Things accelerated rapidly after that. The night nurse arrived, took one look at the monitor and called for assistance. Within moments, my room filled with medical personnel. The cardiac monitor was now emitting a different tone, more insistent. "BP dropping 90-60, someone announced. "Morgan, stay with me," Stephanie insisted, her face appearing in my narrowing field of vision. "You're going to be okay." I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't form. The fluttering in my chest had become a storm, and darkness crept in from the edges of my vision. I heard someone call code blue, and then Stephanie was being pulled away from the bedside. "I'm her sister. I'm a medical student," she protested. "You need to step outside," a firm voice replied. "We'll take care of her." The last thing I saw before consciousness slipped away was Stephanie's terrified face as she was ushered out of the room, her hand reaching back toward me. In that space between consciousness and oblivion, time lost all meaning. I was aware of voices, of movement around me, of hands on my body, but it all seemed distant, happening to someone else. Phrases floated through the darkness. "V-touch with pulse becoming unstable. Push 1 of EPI. Preparing for cardioversion. Clear!" A jolt surged through my body, snapping me briefly back to full awareness. The ceiling tiles came into sharp focus, then blurred again. Another jolt. My back arched involuntarily. A third. Then the storm in my chest gradually calmed, the fluttering replaced by a heavy, exhausted thudding. Rhythm converting, stabilizing. BP coming up, 170. Good work, everyone. When I fully regained consciousness, the crisis team had been replaced by Dr. Patel and a single nurse. Monitoring equipment had been added to the collection already surrounding my bed. Dawn light was just beginning to filter through the window. "Welcome back, Morgan," Dr. Patel said, her calm voice belying the seriousness of what had happened. "You gave us quite a scare." "What happened?" I asked, my voice hoarse, my throat sore from what I would later learn was an intubation tube, removed once I stabilized. "Your heart went into a dangerous rhythm called ventricular tachycardia," she explained. "We had to use electrical cardioversion, essentially a controlled shock, to restore normal rhythm. Your medication has been adjusted, and we'll be keeping you in the ECU for closer monitoring." "Where's my sister?" I asked, trying to sit up. "I'm right here." Stephanie's voice came from the doorway. She looked shell-shocked, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed. She had clearly been crying. They finally let me back in. Dr. Patel finished her examination and stepped away to give us privacy, promising to return soon with a more detailed explanation of what had happened and the treatment plan moving forward. As soon as we were alone, Stephanie rushed to my side, taking my hand in both of hers. "Morgan, I was so scared," she admitted, her professional composure cracking. "When they called the code, I thought I might lose you." "Can't get rid of me that easily," I tried to joke, but my voice broke. The reality of how close I'd come to dying was sinking in. "What time is it?" "Almost 6 in the morning," Stephanie answered. "They've been working on stabilizing you for hours." "Did anyone call Mom and Dad?" I asked, not sure why I still cared. Stephanie's expression hardened slightly. "The hospital called them when you coded. Emergency protocol." Neither answered. I nodded, not surprised but still hurt. "Of course not." Dr. Patel asked if there were other family members to contact. I told her I was your only family. Stephanie's voice was firm, decisive. "As far as I'm concerned, that's the truth." A few hours later, after multiple tests and consultations, Dr. Patel returned with Dr. Wilson, the chief of cardiology. They explained that my condition was more serious than initially assessed. The combination of my congenital defect, the recent medication change, and probable work-related stress had created a perfect storm. "You were extremely fortunate," Dr. Wilson said bluntly. "If this had happened while you were alone at home rather than in a hospital with immediate access to emergency care, the outcome could have been very different." "Will this happen again?" I asked, the fear evident in my voice. "With proper medication management and some lifestyle changes, we can significantly reduce the risk," he assured me. "But I won't sugarcoat this. You need to take this seriously. Your work-life balance needs adjustment." Stephanie, who had appointed herself my medical advocate, asked detailed questions about treatment options, monitoring protocols, and follow-up care. She took notes on her phone, researched medications on her tablet, and generally impressed the cardiology team with her knowledge and determination. "Your sister is getting excellent training," Dr. Wilson commented to me. "She identified the changing rhythm before our monitoring alerts triggered. That quick response was crucial." As the day progressed, the hospital made one more attempt to reach my parents. This time they left messages explicitly stating the seriousness of what had happened overnight. Hours passed, no response. Stephanie paced the room, alternating between checking my monitors, adjusting my pillows, and glaring at her phone. They can't even be bothered to call back, she fumed. Not even a text message. Maybe they're in surgery or court, I suggested half-throatedly, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. For 12 hours straight, both of them. Stephanie shook her head. No, Morgan, this isn't about busy schedules. This is about choices. They're choosing not to be here. They've always chosen everything else over us. The truth of her words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Throughout my life, I had made excuses for my parents' absence, constructed elaborate justifications for their neglect. I had convinced myself that their love was real but simply expressed differently through financial support, through occasional proud acknowledgments of achievements, through the appearance of a perfect family maintained for the outside world. But now, lying in a hospital bed after nearly dying, with only my sister by my side, I couldn't maintain the illusion any longer. The parents I had been waiting for all my life, the ones who would finally show up when it truly mattered, didn't exist. They never had. The third day of my hospital stay dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the echo window and catching dust motes and golden beams. I had been moved from critical to stable condition overnight. My heart rhythm finally normalized with the adjusted medication regimen. Dr. Wilson had mentioned the possibility of transferring me to a regular room if my progress continued. Stephanie had finally been convinced to return to her hotel room for a proper shower and a few hours of actual sleep in a real bed. She had been reluctant to leave, but I insisted, pointing out that she looked worse than I did at this point. Call me if anything changes, she had instructed the nurses before leaving. Anything at all, even if she just seems tired or slightly off. Her protectiveness warmed my heart even as I worried about the toll this crisis was taking on her studies. She had already emailed her professors, explaining the family emergency, but I knew missing clinical rotations could create complications in her tight medical school schedule. I was flipping through TV channels trying to distract myself from these worries, when I heard familiar voices at the nurse's station. My heart monitor betrayed my immediate physical reaction, beeping slightly faster as my pulse increased. "We're here to see our daughter Morgan Taylor," my father's authoritative voice carried clearly into my room. "I'm Dr. Richard Taylor, cardiology at Michigan Presbyterian." "And I'm Patricia Taylor, her mother," came my mother's crisp addition. "We understand she's been moved from the ECU?" I sat up straighter in bed, smoothing my tangled hair and adjusting my hospital gown in an automatic response to their imminent presence. Old habits died hard. The need to appear composed and put together for my parents was deeply ingrained. The door opened and they entered, looking exactly as they always did, impeccably dressed, perfectly groomed, radiating authority and composure. My father wore a tailored suit beneath his white doctor's coat, a stethoscope hanging around his neck like a status symbol. My mother was elegant in a navy dress and pearls, her blonde hair arranged in its usual smooth bob, not a strand out of place. They looked like they were attending a medical conference, not visiting their critically ill daughter. "Morgan," my mother greeted me, approaching the bed but not quite close enough for physical contact. "You're looking better than we expected." "The wonders of modern medicine," my father added, immediately reaching for my chart at the foot of the bed, flipping through it with clinical detachment. "Ventricular tachycardia, cardioversion, medication adjustment." He frowned. "They should have consulted with me before changing your prescriptions." "No, how are you feeling?" "No, we were worried." No acknowledgement of their absence during my medical crisis. "Hello to you too," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Yes, I'm still alive, thanks for asking." My mother sighed, placing her designer handbag on the visitor's chair. "Morgan, there's no need for dramatics. Your father has been monitoring your case remotely. We came as soon as our schedules permitted." 3 days, I stated flatly. "It took you 3 days to find time to visit your daughter after she nearly died." "You were never in danger of dying," my father dismissed, still reading my chart. "The hospital has adequate emergency protocols. The cardioversion was routine." "Routine?" I echoed in disbelief. "They had to restart my heart, Dad. There was nothing routine about it." "Technically, they didn't restart your heart," he corrected pedantically. "They converted an abnormal rhythm to a normal one. Your heart never stopped." A wave of familiar frustration washed over me, the feeling of having my experiences invalidated, my pain minimized, my reality rewritten to fit their preferred narrative. "Richard," my mother interjected, "perhaps we could discuss Morgan's condition with her attending physician. I'm concerned about potential workplace liability. If this episode was triggered by stress at her job, there could be grounds for. My condition has a name, Mom, I interrupted. It's not an episode, and this isn't about liability or lawsuits. This is about the fact that I collapsed at work, was hospitalized for 3 days, nearly died, and neither of you bothered to show up until now. My mother's expression tightened. We're here now, aren't we? Your father is a busy surgeon. I have clients depending on me. We can't simply drop everything at a moment's notice. Stephanie did, I pointed out. She drove 3 hours as soon as she found out, which by the way was by accident because neither of you thought to tell her I was hospitalized. Stephanie is still a student, my father replied dismissively. She doesn't have the professional responsibilities we do. She's in medical school clinical rotations, I corrected. She has exams next week. She has patients depending on her too, but she came anyway because that's what family does. My father finally looked up from the chart, his expression a mixture of impatience and condescension. Morgan, I understand you're emotional right now. That's a normal response to a medical event, but you need to maintain perspective. Your condition, while serious, was manageable. The hospital kept us informed. Had there been a genuine emergency requiring our presence, we would have made arrangements. A genuine emergency, I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. My heart went into a life-threatening rhythm. They had to shock me back to normal. How is that not a genuine emergency? Your father meant, my mother began, but I was no longer willing to hear their excuses. I know exactly what he meant, I cut in. I wasn't important enough. I've never been important enough, not when I was diagnosed at 7, not when I needed someone at school events, not when I graduated college, and not now. The door opened before either of them could respond, and Stephanie walked in, stopping short at the sight of our parents. Her hair was still damp from her shower, and she carried a paper bag that I guessed contained decent food to replace my hospital meals. Well, look who finally showed up, she said coldly, moving to stand beside my bed, physically positioning herself between me and our parents. Stephanie, our mother, greeted her with forced warmth. I'm glad you're here. Perhaps you can help us explain to Morgan why her emotional reaction is disproportionate to the situation. Stephanie's eyebrows shot up. Disproportionate? Are you serious right now? She turned to our father. Dad, you're a cardiologist. You know exactly how serious the attach can be. Morgan could have died. The situation was well managed, he insisted. And speaking of well managed, shouldn't you be at your cardiology rotation? Dr. Brenner mentioned you've missed 2 days of clinical training. Of course that's what you're concerned about. Stephanie laughed bitterly. Not the fact that your daughter nearly died, but that I might fall behind in following your precious footsteps. We're concerned about both of you, our mother interjected smoothly. Your futures are important to us. Morgan's health is important to us. Important? I couldn't contain myself any longer. Years of swallowed hurt, of making excuses for them, of pretending their neglect didn't wound me, all came rushing to the surface. If I were important to you, you would have been here. If I were important, you wouldn't have ignored the hospital's calls. If I were important, you would have told Stephanie I was hospitalized instead of hiding it from her. We didn't hide anything, my father protested. We simply didn't want to alarm her unnecessarily. No, you didn't want her to know because she would have expected you to be here, I countered, and you had no intention of coming. My mother's face hardened. Morgan, this is completely unfair. We have always provided for you, the best schools, the best medical care, financial support whenever you needed it. Not every parent can drop everything to sit at a hospital bedside. No, but most parents would want to, Stephanie interjected. Most parents would at least call. Most parents would care more about their child than about missing a dinner party. My mother's expression flickered surprise that we knew about the dinner party, quickly masked with indignation. We have demanding careers that benefit many people. Sometimes difficult choices must be made. And you've always chosen everything and everyone else over us, I said quietly. I used to think it was because you were saving lives or fighting for justice, noble causes that justified your absence, but that wasn't it, was it? You just didn't want to be parents. We were accessories to your perfect professional image, not people you actually loved or wanted to spend time with. My father's face flushed with anger. That's enough, Morgan. This kind of emotional outburst isn't good for your recovery. We came to check on you, not to be subjected to accusations and dramatics. No, Dad, I said, finding a strength and clarity I had never felt before. For once in my life, it's not enough. It's not enough for you to show up days late, minimize what happened, and then expect gratitude for your brief appearance. I took a deep breath. I want you to leave. Excuse me, my mother looked genuinely shocked. I want you to leave, I repeated more firmly. Both of you, I don't want you here. My father's expression darkened. Morgan, you're clearly not thinking clearly. The medication can cause emotional lability. Don't you dare medicalize my feelings, I interrupted. This isn't about medication or emotional lability. This is about 28 years of neglect and dismissal. This is about me finally recognizing that I deserve better than parents who show up 3 days late and then tell me my near-death experience wasn't important enough to interrupt their schedules. If that's how you feel, my father said stiffly, perhaps we should reconsider our financial support, your health insurance through our family plan, the subsidized rent on your apartment. Are you seriously threatening to cut her off financially because she called you out on being terrible parents? Stephanie asked incredulously, while she's lying in a hospital bed. We're not terrible parents, my mother insisted. We've given you both every advantage. Except the only one that really mattered, I said quietly. Your time, your presence, your love. A heavy silence fell over the room. My heart monitor beeped steadily, the only sound for several long moments. I think I finally continued that I'd rather figure things out on my own than continue this transaction, because that's what it's been, hasn't it? You provide financial support, and in return I don't complain about your absence or make demands on your time. I pretend we're a normal family for the benefit of your colleagues and friends. My father's jaw tightened. You have no idea the sacrifices we've made. No, you have no idea what sacrifice looks like, Stephanie cut in. Morgan has sacrificed her health working to make you proud. She sacrificed her childhood raising me when you couldn't be bothered. She sacrificed her own needs and feelings to maintain your perfect family illusion. That's sacrifice. My parents exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication developed over decades of marriage, and my mother reached for her handbag. I can see this conversation isn't productive right now, she said coolly. We'll give you time to rest and reconsider your position when you're feeling more rational. I've never been more rational in my life, I interrupted. Please go, and unless you're ready to have a real conversation about our relationship, one where you actually listen instead of dismiss, don't come back. My father looked like he might argue further, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. Without another word, they turned and walked out, the door closing behind them with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. In their wake, Stephanie and I sat in stunned silence for several moments. I half expected to feel regret or panic at what I'd done, at the bridges I'd just burned. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. Are you okay? Stephanie finally asked, perching on the edge of my bed. I think I actually am, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in a long time, I think I might be okay. Stephanie reached for my hand. They might really cut you off financially, you know. Dad doesn't make empty threats. I know, I acknowledged, but I have savings, I have my job, I have my own insurance through work, and most importantly, I squeezed her hand, I have you, my real family. Always, she promised, and I knew it wasn't an empty word. Stephanie had shown up when it mattered most, not just this week, but throughout our lives. That was worth more than any financial support our parents could provide. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across my hospital room, I realized that sometimes the most painful collapses led to the most necessary rebuilding. My heart had faltered, but in that moment of vulnerability, I had found the strength to finally stand up for myself. 1 week after my collapse, I was finally cleared to go home. Dr. Wilson reviewed my discharge instructions carefully, emphasizing the importance of medication compliance, stress reduction, and regular follow-up appointments. The hospital room that had become my temporary residence was filled with the flowers my colleagues had sent, get-well cards from friends, and the subtle evidence of Stephanie's continuous presence, her medical textbooks stacked on the windowsill, her sweater draped over the visitor's chair. You're lucky to have such a dedicated sister, Dr. Wilson commented as he signed my discharge papers. Most medical students wouldn't be able to coordinate clinical rotation absences so efficiently. She's pretty amazing, I agreed, watching as Stephanie packed my belongings into a duffel bag she had brought from my apartment. She had received special permission to adjust her rotation schedule, compressing her required hours into intensive blocks so she could stay in Chicago with me during my initial recovery. As the nurse went through final checkout procedures, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week, not just my health situation, which now required a more rigorous medication regimen and lifestyle modifications, but my entire perspective on family and what I deserved from relationships. Your apartment is on the 3rd floor with no elevator, right? Stephanie asked as she helped me into the wheelchair required for hospital protocol. That won't work during your recovery. You can't be climbing stairs multiple times a day with your heart condition. I was thinking about that, I admitted. I could stay at a hotel for a while, maybe. Stephanie shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. You're staying with me. But your place in Michigan is hours away and you have school. I meant I'm staying with you, she clarified. I've already talked to my program director. I can do my study modules remotely for the next month, and I'll commute back for required clinical hours. I've got it all worked out. The realization that Stephanie had rearranged her entire life to care for me brought unexpected tears to my eyes. You don't have to do that, I protested weakly. I know I don't have to, she replied simply. I want to. That's the difference. That difference between obligation and genuine care had been illuminated so starkly during my hospitalization that I couldn't ignore it anymore. My parents had never come back after our confrontation, though my mother had sent a text message informing me that they had instructed their accountant to continue my health insurance coverage until the situation resolves. The conditional nature of even that basic support spoke volumes. As we left the hospital, the April sunshine felt glorious on my face after a week indoors. Stephanie had called a rideshare to take us to my apartment, where we would collect more of my things before relocating temporarily to a short-term rental she had found closer to the ground floor. Amanda from work has called 3 times to check on you, Stephanie mentioned as we drove through downtown Chicago. She seems really nice. Amanda was the colleague who had been sitting next to me during my presentation, the first to notice something was wrong. I hadn't realized we were particularly close before this, but she had visited twice during my hospital stay, bringing magazines and updating me on office gossip. She is nice, I agreed. Everyone at work has been surprisingly supportive. It was true. My boss Diana had called personally to assure me my job was secure and to take whatever time I needed for recovery. My presentations had been reassigned, my accounts temporarily managed by colleagues, and not a single person had expressed resentment about the redistribution of work. It was a stark contrast to the reaction I had feared: disappointment, professional setback, perhaps even job loss. The next few weeks established a new rhythm to my life. Mornings began with medication and a balanced breakfast that Stephanie insisted upon. We would take short walks, gradually increasing the distance as my strength returned. Afternoons often included virtual appointments with Dr. Wilson or sessions with Dr. Brooks, the therapist I had started seeing to process the family trauma I had ignored for so long. Family estrangement is more common than most people realize, Dr. Brooks explained during one of our early sessions, and it's rarely a snap decision. Usually, it's the culmination of years of hurt, boundary violations, and unmet needs. I still feel guilty sometimes, I admitted, like I'm being ungrateful for everything they did provide. Material support doesn't excuse emotional neglect, she responded gently. It's possible to acknowledge what your parents gave you while also recognizing what they withheld. Both realities can exist simultaneously. Those therapy sessions became a cornerstone of my recovery, not just physically from the cardiac event, but emotionally from decades of dismissal and minimization. For the first time, I allowed myself to name the neglect for what it was, to feel the hurt without making excuses for those who had caused it. Stephanie divided her time between caring for me in Chicago and commuting to Michigan for her required clinical hours. The arrangement was exhausting for her, but she refused to consider alternatives. You practically raised me, she reminded me when I expressed concern about the toll on her studies. Let me do this for you. 6 months after my collapse, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. My heart condition had stabilized with the new medication regimen. I had returned to work part-time, with accommodations that included remote days and a strict ban on overtime. Diana had been true to her word about supporting my recovery, even creating a new workflow system to prevent any employee from facing the kind of pressure that had contributed to my collapse. Stephanie had returned to Michigan full-time for her final year of medical school, but we talked daily and visited each other monthly. Our bond, always close, had deepened into something unbreakable through the crucible of crisis. Most significantly, I had maintained the boundary with our parents. There had been attempts at reconciliation, gifts sent to my apartment, messages relayed through mutual acquaintances, even a legal document from their estate planner indicating I remained in their will. But each overture came without the one thing I had requested: acknowledgement of the emotional neglect and a willingness to build a different kind of relationship moving forward. Instead, I had found family in unexpected places. Amanda from work had become a close friend, inviting me to her book club where I connected with a diverse group of women who shared stories, laughter, and support. Through a cardiac patient support group Dr. Wilson had recommended, I met others managing similar conditions, including Elaine, a a 60-year-old grandmother who had become something of a mentor to me. The heart is both fragile and remarkably resilient, Elaine told me during one of our coffee meetups after group sessions, kind of like relationships. On a crisp October evening, exactly 6 months after my hospitalization, Stephanie flew in from Michigan to celebrate my birthday. We had dinner at my favorite restaurant, followed by a walk along the Chicago riverfront, the city lights reflected on the water, creating a magical backdrop for our conversation. "I got you something," Stephanie said, pulling a small gift box from her jacket pocket. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with two interlocking hearts, one larger, one smaller. "It's beautiful," I said as she helped me fasten it around my neck. "The jeweler thought I was shopping for a mother-daughter set," Stephanie explained with a smile, "and in a way I was. You were both a sister and a mother to me growing up." I hugged her tightly, marveling at the young woman she had become, compassionate, brilliant, strong in all the ways our parents had never taught us to be. "This is the first birthday I can remember where I'm not waiting for a call or visit from Mom and Dad that probably won't come," I realized aloud, "and strangely it feels more peaceful than sad." "Because you're not living in limbo anymore," Stephanie suggested. "You made a choice about what kind of relationships you deserve." As we continued our walk, I reflected on how my collapse at work had precipitated not an ending but a beginning. In losing the family I had desperately tried to please for 28 years, I had gained clarity, authentic connections, and a sense of self-worth I had never before allowed myself to claim. My heart, literally and figuratively, was stronger now, not because it had never been broken, but because I had finally acknowledged the breaks and allowed myself to heal properly. "You know what I've learned through all this," I said to Stephanie as we paused to watch a boat glide by on the river. "Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you don't know how, and that's not your fault. And sometimes," she added, linking her arm through mine, "the family you need isn't the one you were born into, but the one you build for yourself." As we turned toward home, my real home, not the empty showcase of my childhood, I felt a completeness that had nothing to do with having perfect parents or a perfect heart. Life was fragile, yes, but also infinitely precious in its imperfection. My collapse had taught me that. And for that lesson, painful as it had been, I was finally, genuinely grateful. If my story has resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family expectations or medical challenges. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones, or found family in unexpected places? Please share in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about navigating life's unexpected turns. Remember, sometimes our deepest wounds can lead to our greatest healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in whatever challenges you might be facing in your own life.